The room was dead silent. Not the kind of silence that felt calm or peaceful. This was a heavy, suffocating kind, the kind that made the air feel thicker and every breath feel harder to take. Even the soft hum of the ceiling lights seemed louder in the absence of voices. Around a massive, glossy conference table sat the company's top engineers, their eyes locked on a giant screen at the far end of the room. Lines of code scrolled endlessly. Graphs plunged deep into the red, and flashing warning signs painted the room in pulses of crimson light. Every single number on that display told the same grim story. The system was in free fall. This wasn't some small hiccup. This was a crisis. The company, a global tech powerhouse with billions in annual revenue, had just suffered a catastrophic system failure. And not just any system, but one of their most profitable and time-sensitive operations. Overnight, it had gone from fully functional to paralyzed. The cost of every minute ticked upward on an internal losses board, millions evaporating with every passing hour. And if the problem wasn't fixed soon, the number could easily reach $500 million before the end of the day. The CEO, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor Kane, paced like a general surveying a battlefield. Her heels clicked against the polished floor in sharp, staccato beats. She spoke in clipped sentences, her voice slicing through the silence like a whip. "Status," she demanded. The lead engineer, a man with deep lines under his eyes and a tie loosened around his neck, barely looked up from his laptop. "We've run diagnostics 3 times. No change. The patch fails on every test cycle." Phones rang constantly, the noise bouncing off the glass walls. Large video monitors along the side of the room displayed grainy feeds of specialists in Germany, India, and Japan, each looking just as frustrated. They threw out rapid-fire technical terms, their voices overlapping in a mess of confusion. "Have you isolated the process loop?" one asked. "We've tried rerouting the main server cluster," another replied. Same result every time. A third voice cut in. "It's like the system is fighting itself." The tension in the room was almost physical, like static before a lightning strike. In the middle of all this chaos, the hallway outside seemed oddly quiet. That's where Maria Alvarez came in, pushing her well-worn janitor's cart slowly along the polished tile floor. Maria had been working here for 8 years. She wasn't part of the engineering teams. She wasn't a department head. She didn't even have an office. Her job was to keep this building clean, the bathroom smelling fresh, the trash bins empty, the floors shining. She had no degree in engineering, no formal business training. Just a single mom, doing her best to keep food on the table and rent paid on time. But Maria wasn't always a janitor. Years ago, in a different life, she had been one of the top computer science students at her university in Mexico. She'd built small programs for local businesses, fixed broken networks for friends, and even dreamed of working for a big tech company one day. But dreams are fragile. Her husband had walked out on her when she was pregnant with their daughter, Sophia. Her mother had fallen ill soon after. Between medical bills and the needs of a newborn, Maria had been forced to leave college and take whatever work would keep them afloat. She chose stability over ambition, survival over dreams. But she never let her mind go dull. Late at night, after Sophia was asleep, Maria would sit at the kitchen table with her old laptop, reading programming manuals she'd found secondhand, watching free coding lectures online, and solving logic puzzles just to keep her skills alive. It was a part of her life no one at work knew about. To them, she was just Maria, the janitor. She rolled her cart down the hall, the faint scent of lemon cleaner trailing in her wake, until she reached the open door to the war room. She didn't mean to stop, but her eyes caught sight of the massive screen inside. She froze. The data was overwhelming. Numbers flying past, error messages stacking on top of each other, and graphs that looked like they were plummeting off a cliff. But Maria didn't see chaos. She saw patterns. One specific repeating error caught her attention. She narrowed her eyes. It was oddly familiar. The exact kind of looping bug she had seen just weeks earlier in a free online coding challenge. Back then, the fix had been surprisingly simple, but only if you knew exactly where to look. Her heart gave a sudden jolt. Could it be the same thing? She stood there for a moment, gripping the handle of her cart. Her mind wrestled with itself. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that room. This wasn't her place. They had some of the smartest minds in the industry working on this problem. What would they care about the opinion of a janitor? And yet, what if she was right? The thought wouldn't leave her. She imagined the engineers inside, working themselves to exhaustion, the CEO barking orders, the financial team panicking as the losses grew. She thought about the possible layoffs if the company bled too much money today. She thought about Sophia and the lesson she'd always tried to teach her. If you see a way to help, don't stay quiet just because you're afraid. Maria glanced at the screen one last time. She could walk away and no one would ever know she'd been here. Or she could say something and risk looking foolish. Her stomach tightened. Her pulse pounded in her ears. The choice was hers. And right then in that hallway, she decided she couldn't stay silent. Maria wasn't always a janitor. That's the part no one in this building knew. They saw the uniform, the cart of cleaning supplies, the gentle good morning as she passed through the halls. But they didn't see the woman she used to be. Years ago, in her small hometown in Mexico, Maria had been one of the brightest students in her computer science program. She wasn't just good at coding, she loved it. For her, solving a programming problem was like cracking a secret code or unlocking a puzzle box. She built custom software for small businesses, repaired computer networks, and even took on freelance jobs to help her family. Professors told her she had the kind of mind that could change the world. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Her husband left without warning, abandoning her when she was pregnant with their daughter, Sophia. Just months later, her mother fell gravely ill. Between hospital visits, doctor bills, and the demands of caring for a newborn, Maria's world tilted on its axis. The bright, promising path she'd been on suddenly felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. So she made a choice, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. She left college. She stopped taking on tech projects. She took the first stable job she could find, even if it meant cleaning offices instead of designing software. Stability meant survival, and survival meant Sophia would have a roof over her head. But Maria never let her mind go dull. Even after long, exhausting shifts, she'd stay up late at her kitchen table with her old, dented laptop. She read programming manuals she'd bought secondhand for a few pesos. She watched free coding lectures online, sometimes with subtitles because they were in English, pausing every few seconds to take notes. She joined online puzzle forums and programming challenges, treating them like mental workouts to keep her skills sharp. It wasn't for a degree anymore. It wasn't for a career. It was simply because problem-solving was in her blood. She couldn't not do it. And now, here she was, in a hallway of one of the biggest tech firms in the world, her hand on the handle of the janitor's cart, staring into a room full of the most accomplished engineers in the building. Her gaze drifted to the massive screen dominating the wall inside. At first, she told herself she was just curious. But then her eyes focused on the data, the endless lines of code flashing by, the repeating error messages. And there it was, a pattern. Her heart gave a small, startled jolt. She knew that pattern. It was the same kind of looping code error she'd seen just a month ago in an online programming challenge. The challenge had been designed to trip people up. The bug was in the obvious place, but hidden in a tiny, overlooked process that ran in the background. Once you knew where to look, the fix was almost embarrassingly simple. She swallowed hard. Could it really be the same thing? The longer she stared, the more convinced she became. The symptoms matched perfectly. The infinite loop, the process blocking the main function, the cascading failures that made it seem like a dozen things were wrong when really there was just one small root cause. Her first instinct was to walk away. This wasn't her problem. These people were paid more in a month than she made in a year to fix things like this. They had degrees, credentials, years of experience. What could she possibly add that they hadn't already thought of? But another voice in her head, quieter but steadier, said, "What if you're right?" She thought about what was happening in that room. Every passing minute, the company was losing millions. If the problem wasn't fixed soon, there would be consequences. Big ones. Layoffs, budget cuts, people scrambling for jobs. People like her, who lived paycheck to paycheck, could be the first to go. And she thought about Sophia. about the way her daughter's eyes lit up when Maria taught her something new, about the time Sophia had asked, "Mama, why do people think only certain people can be smart?" Maria's chest tightened. She had spent years telling her daughter that intelligence wasn't about titles or uniforms. It was about persistence, about never stopping the search for an answer. And now here she was, hesitating. The hallway felt colder suddenly, the hum of fluorescent lights loud in her ears. Her palms were damp inside her cleaning gloves. She could feel her heart pounding against her ribs. If she spoke up, they might laugh. They might tell her to get back to her job. They might look at her the way people sometimes did, like she had wandered somewhere she didn't belong. But if she stayed silent, the idea of walking away knowing she could have helped and didn't felt even worse. She took one small step closer to the open doorway. Inside, the tension was so thick it was almost visible. The CEO stood at the head of the table, jaw tight, her sharp gaze bouncing between the engineers and the screen. Phones rang. People muttered under their breath. Keyboards clacked in frustration. No one even noticed Maria in the doorway. Not yet. Her eyes went back to that one line of repeating code on the screen. She could practically see the solution in her head. It wasn't magic. It wasn't genius. It was just experience. The kind you got not from fancy degrees, but from countless hours of trial, error, and stubbornness. She realized in that moment that she had a choice to make. She could step back into the hall, keep pushing her cart, and pretend she'd never seen a thing. Or she could take a risk, open her mouth, and see if anyone was willing to listen. Maria took a deep breath. Her voice came out before she could stop it. Maria lingered in the doorway, her hand still on the handle of the mop, her heart pounding so hard she was certain someone in the room could hear it. She didn't know how long she'd been standing there, maybe seconds, maybe an eternity. Inside, the air was electric with frustration. People spoke in sharp bursts. Fingers hammered on keyboards, and the screen at the end of the table kept flashing those angry red warnings. Finally, one of the engineers, a tall man with thin wireframe glasses and the expression of someone who had been awake far too long, noticed her. His eyes narrowed slightly. Ma'am, can we help you?" His voice was polite enough, but the undertone was clear. "You're in the wrong place." Maria felt her throat tighten. This was it. This was the moment she could still turn around, push her cart away, and pretend she'd never stopped here. Instead, she gripped the handle of her mop tighter, as if the solid wood could steady her shaking hands. I think I know what's wrong with your system," she blurted out before fear could steal the words away. The room reacted instantly. A ripple of awkward laughter passed through the table. It wasn't cruel, but it carried that dismissive disbelief of people hearing something absurd. A janitor? In the middle of a meeting where the brightest technical minds in the company had been summoned, offering to solve a crisis worth hundreds of millions? It sounded like the setup to a bad joke. The CTO, a broad-shouldered man in a crisp navy suit, turned in his chair and gave a faint shake of his head. "This is a highly complex issue," he said firmly, as if he were explaining to a child why she couldn't touch the grown-up tools. Without waiting for her reply, he turned back to the flashing wall of data. Maria's stomach sank. She could feel her cheeks heating, and a dozen pairs of eyes turning away from her, like she was invisible again. But then another voice cut through the air. "What exactly do you see?" The words were calm but carried weight. They belonged to Eleanor Kane, the CEO. She hadn't moved from her place at the head of the table, but her sharp gaze was now fixed on Maria. It wasn't a friendly look. Exactly. It was measuring, assessing, like a chess player considering whether a surprising move might be worth the risk. Maria's mouth felt dry. Every instinct told her to tread carefully. She stepped closer, feeling the tension in the room thicken with every step. "You're running a security patch in loop mode," she said, forcing the words out steadily. "It's blocking your main process. If you remove line 547B and reset, it'll clear in seconds." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the far side of the table, an engineer frowned and leaned toward his monitor. His fingers began flying across the keyboard. "Wait, she's talking about." Another voice interrupted. "Check the patch script. She might be..." Line 547B, someone echoed. Suddenly, the room wasn't ignoring her anymore. It was alive with motion, chairs scraping, screens lighting up, voices rising in urgency. Engineers who had been slumped in defeat were now sitting bolt upright, typing commands into their consoles. Maria stood frozen in place, unsure she should leave or stay. Her heart was racing so fast she felt lightheaded. Then, in less than 30 seconds, it happened. The massive display at the front of the room, the one that had been flooded with pulsing red alerts all morning, began to clear. Error messages vanished one by one. Graphs shot upward, and the angry flashing gave way to a cool, calm green. The system was fixed, not after days of work, not after calling in outside consultants. In under half a minute, silence fell again, but it was different now. Not heavy with dread, but stunned into stillness. Maria looked around. The engineers who had laughed a moment ago were staring at her as if she had stepped out of a dream. A few exchanged glances, and she caught the faintest trace of embarrassment in their expressions. Others simply looked curious, maybe even a little impressed. The CTO cleared his throat, but no words came out. His face was unreadable. Eleanor Kane broke the silence. "Well," she said slowly, her lips curving into the smallest hint of a smile, "I think we owe Ms. Alvarez a thank you." Maria blinked. She wasn't sure she should smile back or apologize for interrupting. She still had her mop in her hand, her gloves on, and the smell of cleaning solution faintly clinging to her. She fell out of place in every possible way. And yet, for the first time in years, she also felt exactly where she was meant to be. One of the younger engineers finally spoke. "How did you see that so fast?" Maria hesitated. "I've seen it before," she said softly. "It was part of a programming challenge I did online last month." That earned a few surprised looks. It was clear some of them were now wondering just how much this janitor knew. Eleanor tilted her head. "Interesting," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Maria didn't linger. She nodded politely, backed out of the doorway, and pushed her cart down the hall. But her mind was spinning. She had just walked into one of the most high-pressure meetings in the company, spoken a few sentences, and solved a problem that the smartest minds in the building couldn't crack all morning. And whether she realized it or not, the course of her life had just shifted. For a moment, the entire room just froze. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner and the distant chatter of phones ringing somewhere in the building. Every pair of eyes, dozens of them, was locked on Maria, as if she'd just walked out a movie screen and into real life, performing some impossible act no one could explain. One of the engineers, a young man in a crisp white shirt who looked like he hadn't slept in days, finally broke the silence. How did you know that?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. Maria felt her cheeks warm. "I read a lot in my spare time," she said softly, almost embarrassed. She gave a small shrug, as though the thing she had just done, saving a $500 million problem in under 30 seconds, was nothing more than fixing a squeaky door hinge. A ripple of quiet murmurs moved through the room. Some engineers leaned toward each other, whispering. Others simply stared. A few still looked skeptical, as if their pride was battling the reality of what had just happened. After all, this room had been filled with some of the brightest, most highly paid minds in industry. And yet, it was a janitor who had solved the problem. At the far end of the table, CEO Eleanor Kane leaned back in her chair. She was known for her sharp business acumen, her no-nonsense leadership style, and her ability to read people like open books. She didn't smile often, but now she did. It wasn't just a polite smile, either. There was something more, something deeper. Gratitude, yes. Relief, absolutely. But behind her eyes was a glimmer of respect, the kind of recognition reserved for people who had just proven themselves under impossible pressure. "Maria," Eleanor said, her voice calm but commanding, "come with me." The command wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a clear bell. Without a word, Maria set down her mop, adjusted her worn cleaning gloves, and followed the CEO. As they walked down the hallway, Maria's mind raced. Had she overstepped? Was she about to be fired for interrupting a critical meeting? Or was this something else entirely? They stopped at Eleanor's office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the skyline like a painting. The faint smell of coffee lingered in the air, and a single potted plant sat by the desk, its leaves catching the afternoon sunlight. "Sit," Eleanor said, gesturing toward the chair opposite her. Maria hesitated, then lowered herself into the seat. Her hands rested awkwardly in her lap. Eleanor leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. "Tell me your story," she said simply. And so Maria did. She told Eleanor about her childhood, how she had grown up loving puzzles and logic games. She talked about being one of the top students in her computer science program, about building small software tools for local shops back in her hometown. Then, her voice faltered when she spoke about the day her husband left, how she'd been holding their 3-month-old daughter in her arms, and he simply walked out. Her mother's illness had come soon after, bringing medical bills that towered over her. College had to be sacrificed, along with her dream job in tech. Cleaning floors and emptying trash bins might not have been glamorous, but it was steady money that kept the lights on and her daughter fed. Yet even in the toughest moments, she told Eleanor, she never let her mind go dull. She devoured free coding tutorials, read tech blogs on her phone during lunch breaks, and stayed up late solving programming challenges when her daughter was asleep. She said it wasn't about holding on to some distant dream. It was about keeping her brain alive, even if no one cared what she knew. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her eyes never leaving Maria's. When Maria finished, the CEO sat back in her chair, the wheels in her mind clearly turning. "You know," Eleanor said slowly, "I've been in this industry long enough to know that degrees and titles aren't the only measure of talent. What you did today," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "you didn't just spot the problem. You acted. You spoke up even when you knew people might laugh. That's rare." Maria lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. The next morning, the company gathered for an all-hands meeting. The massive conference hall buzzed with chatter as employees filled the rows. Most had no idea why the meeting had been called, though rumors were already swirling about the janitor who had outcoded the engineering team. Eleanor took the stage, her usual composed expression in place. "Before we begin today's updates," she said into the microphone, "I want to acknowledge something extraordinary that happened yesterday." A hush fell over the crowd. In the middle of a crisis, when this company was losing millions by the hour, someone stepped forward with a solution. Someone who was not part of the engineering team or the IT department. In fact, someone who wasn't even hired to work in tech at all. And yet, she fixed the problem in less than 30 seconds. There were gasps and murmurs now. "Effective immediately," Eleanor continued. "Maria Alvarez is no longer a janitor. She is now a junior systems analyst. Full salary, full benefits, and complete training and mentorship. And," she added with a smile, "I expect you'll be seeing her in many more meetings from now on." The room erupted into applause. Maria, standing awkwardly at the side of the stage, felt her chest tighten. It wasn't just about the job title or the pay. It was about finally being seen, being valued for the mind she had kept alive all those years. She caught sight of a few engineers smiling at her, some even nodding in respect. For the first time in a long time, Maria allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Maria's promotion didn't just ripple through the company. It made waves across the entire tech world. The next morning, the story was everywhere. News sites ran bold headlines. "Single mom janitor saves company $500 million. Lands dream job overnight." Talk shows debated her rise from mop bucket to motherboard. Social media feeds lit up with her photo, standing next to Eleanor Kane, the CEO, both of them smiling in the now famous shot taken right after the system came back online. On Twitter, people wrote things like, "Maria Alvarez is a proof that talent doesn't need a degree. It needs a chance. Dear CEOs, next time you walk past your janitor, say hi. They might just save your company one day." Her inbox was suddenly overflowing. Messages poured in from every corner of the globe. Single moms, struggling students, retirees learning to code, all saying her story had lit a fire in them. Tech recruiters tried to swoop in, dangling lucrative job offers with six-figure salaries and glossy perks. One company even offered to move her and her daughter to Silicon Valley with a signing bonus big enough to pay off her debts in a day. But Maria stayed. It wasn't just about loyalty. It was about gratitude. Eleanor Kane had believed her when no one else in that conference room would even listen. She gave Maria not just a title, but a seat at the table, and Maria wasn't about to walk away from that. Her first months as a junior systems analyst weren't glamorous. She had to relearn the basics of professional coding, navigate corporate software systems she'd never touched before, and sit through hours of training. Some of the engineers, embarrassed that a janitor had solved what they couldn't, were distant at first. But Maria didn't take it personally. She knew trust had to be earned, not demanded. She worked late. She asked smart questions. She volunteered for every messy debugging project no one else wanted to touch. And little by little, people started seeing her not as that janitor who got lucky, but as Maria, the problem solver. By the end of the year, something incredible happened. She wasn't just good at her job. She was one of the best. Maria became known for spotting issues before they spiraled into disasters. She had a knack for reading code like it was a story, sensing when something didn't feel right, even if the metrics still looked normal. At home, life had transformed too. Her apartment, once barely affordable on her janitor salary, now had a proper desk where she could work from home. Her daughter Sophia had her own bedroom instead of sharing a bed with her mom. There was always enough food in the fridge, and Maria could finally say yes to things she used to always say no to: a school field trip, a new pair of sneakers, piano lessons. One evening, Sophia came home from school beaming. "Mom, guess what?" she said, dumping her backpack on the couch. "What's up, Mija?" Maria asked. "I told the whole class that my mom is a computer genius, and they believe me," Sophia said, puffing her chest out proudly. Maria laughed, but inside, tears stung her eyes. All those nights she had mopped hallways, pushing through fatigue, wondering if she was doing enough for her daughter. Now, she had her answer. The company itself changed because of her story. Eleanor made it a point to remind her leadership team, and sometimes the whole company, of the lesson Maria's moment had taught them. Never underestimate people because of their job title. Talent has no uniform. We hire people for roles, but we respect them as individuals with untapped potential. A year after Maria's promotion, the company launched an internal program called Hidden Talent, designed to give employees in non-technical roles a chance to learn new skills and transition into different departments. Dozens of receptionists, warehouse workers, and administrative staff took part, and some even found themselves moving into high-demand tech positions. Whenever that program was mentioned, people knew whose story had inspired it. Maria herself didn't seek fame, but found her anyway. She was invited to speak at conferences, not as a coder, but as a living example of resilience and opportunity. Standing on those stages, looking out at hundreds of faces, she always told the same truth. "I didn't save the company because I'm the smartest person in the world. I did it because I never stopped learning. Even when life told me I didn't belong in tech anymore. The world will try to put you in a box. Don't stay there if you don't want to." Her words resonated, especially with people who've been told they were too late to change their lives. But despite the attention, Maria stayed grounded. She still carried her old janitor's badge in her bag, a reminder of where she started. She never wanted to forget the smell of floor cleaner, the hum of vacuum motors, the quiet hours after the office emptied, because it was in those hours, long before anyone knew her name, that she had chosen to keep learning instead of giving up. Years later, the company faced another system emergency. This time, Maria was in the control room from the start, sitting at the main desk, leading the team. An engineer half-jokingly asked, "So, should we just hand you the keyboard now?" Maria smiled. "Not this time. This is a team job." They solved the problem together. But every now and then, she caught a few glances her way, the same mix of admiration and disbelief that had filled the room that day she first spoke up. Her story had become more than a headline. It was a legend inside the company, passed down to every new hire during onboarding. Sometimes the smartest person in the room is the one holding the mop, not the microphone. And Maria, she just kept doing what she'd always done, solving problems, helping her team, and showing Sophia that no matter how far you've fallen, you can always rise again if you refuse to stop learning.